Hello, thank you for joining us for today's live cast. We are the Desktop Developer Show, where Billy and I are both desktop developers, have been doing it for many years, and we like to talk to people who think alike and who build applications that utilize the strength of the operating system and the powerful graphic tools that are available for desktop applications. So this week, as I am joined every week, Billy Hollis is joining me from Nashville. Hello, Billy.
Hey, Walt, how are things out there in Seattle?
They're good. We have another Seattleite with us today, too. Clint is joining us. You're over in Bellevue, Clint?
Close enough.
Yeah. So Clint is joining us. He's going to be talking to us today about the Microsoft or the Windows PowerToys. And you just joined the team, what, about a year ago?
Yeah, so I started mid-October on running PowerToys as the lead, and right now we just released 18.1.
Nice. Now you've had an interesting journey at Microsoft. I won't spend much time on it, but you did a bunch of stuff for some cool stuff at Channel 9. You worked on Temple Studio and other things. Then you left for a while and came back. So what was it about PowerToys that was interesting to you?
I love the idea of helping out developers and helping out our community and power users. So anyone that has ever interacted with me knows that I'm massively customer obsessed. So when that kind of stuff happens and an opportunity to make a big impact, like it's why wouldn't you? So like PowerToys back in the day started with Windows 95, Windows XP. And these utilities were written by individuals at Microsoft saying like, this is a pain point for me. And if it's a pain point for me, it's probably a pain point for other people. So why don't we bundle these utilities up and then release them into the wild, see what people like and don't like. And then if you actually take a step back and you look at what was from 95 and XP PowerToys, a lot of them got put back into Windows. So these small little things helped actually improve and make Windows better. So that's where we're looking at a lot of these things and think, could this help make Windows better? So we have, basic things like a shortcut guide where the origin story for the shortcut guide is basically Rich Turner and Mike Harsh were chit-chatting and they're like, like Jennifer Gentleman always posts these great tweets like, hey, did you know about window key period? And then people are like, no, what's that? And it turns out to be the emoji icon picker. So, or Windows now has a built-in hotkey for screenshots, which is Shift Window S. So if you don't,
oh yeah, that's one of my favorites. I use that all the time.
I use it all the time. So if you're not made aware of these things, because they're kind of hidden, it gets really hard to find them. So we're testing out, incubating ideas like how do you make this accessible? How do you make it easy? And that's just one of the couple PowerToys that we're currently releasing.
My understanding, the original PowerToys was some of the developers that were working on the Windows OS itself, and they were like, there's something that it's a side project, and they bundle them together in the PowerToys. So is the PowerToys, this is a separate group, though. It's not part of the operating system group, though, right? Is that correct?
We are in, so now you're going to start getting into like org lines, but.
Well, no, I don't mean to say that. You're people that are on your team are not working on the Windows operating system itself.
We are. So I'm inside the developer ecosystem and platform team, DEP. Which is basically it's the team that helps build out the AIs for all the applications. So the sister team on top of PowerToys. So literally if we were in the office to the literally I share an office with Rich Turner, and one of the offices directly to the left of me, the terminal and Windows subsystem for Linux team. You go a couple offices down, it's the XAML team. So there's countless people that are working on the platform. I'm just lucky enough to work on a product like PowerToys.
Oh, that's got to be fun to work on because you don't have a lot of the constraints around what you try. Putting something into the operating system is a huge investment. because of all the localization, all the testing, everything's going to have to be done. So you get to move a lot more quickly and prove out whether things deserve, I guess is the right word, to be in the operating system.
Yeah, but it also lets us hyper focus on a certain audience. So we focus on power users, and by focusing on this subset of users, we tend to be the spear tip, the bleeding edge. We're the users that adopted, LCD screens back when they cost an insane amount of money. You look at the trend right now for developers is they use super large screen monitors. And that's actually where the origin stories for Fancy Zones came in. Is it was initially created as a proof of concept to figure out how can we make the Aero Snap experience better for super big screen monitors.
Before you go any further, can you explain what Fancy Zones is?
Yeah, actually, can I just give a demo?
That would be great. Yeah, if you could do that and show a couple of the other features that are in PowerToys, and they'll help us talk about it later. So let me get your screen up.
Okay, so here you can see my wonderful desktop, and you can see a couple windows open here. So I'm going to pull up Launcher, and let's go launch Terminal. So I'm going to launch Terminal here, and I'm going to go basically hold down Shift and then snap it. So you can see right there, I have these zones, and we even added in a new feature where you see the 2 zones highlight. So that then will go into multiple zones. And if you wanted to, I just hit Window key tilde, and you can see I can switch zones. So here you can see like a priority grid. And I'm going to go increase the zones to 5 here. So I have a big center and 2 on the left and the right. So I hit apply, and then I can go drag. And then let's say I want my terminal window to be super big. I'm going to go launch PowerToys Run again. I'm going to start up VS Code. Now here, because I had already snapped PowerToys Run to the zone 1 and snap to it, but if I wanted to, I can just snap it to zone that zone, or let's make our settings right there. So it's super powerful in that sense, where I can make my screen act exactly how I need it to act.
I can see this as being really useful, like you said, for somebody that's got a 55-inch widescreen monitor. I mean, many of us have used multiple monitors as a solution for this, right? You have 2 monitors and you drag from one screen to the other to get a similar thing. But if you have one single monitor, you typically only have 2 zones, right? In the standard OS.
Well, they just added in basically 4 zones, so upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right. But even then, that's still like if you have an ultra wide screen. So if one of the 48-inch monitors that are like the size of my arms stretch, you're still split down the center. And if you think about it, you majority of the time are point blank at the center of your screen. So these are things that everyone is kind of proactively looking at. And as you see right now, PowerToys Run.
Let me get your screen back up.
Okay. So if you look at PowerToys Run here, it launches in the center of your screen, exactly where we strongly believe on the PowerToys team your focus is. This is one of those things that as the PowerToys team, we ship every month, and we can actually ship faster. So when we do a lot of these things, we experiment, we incubate ideas. And this is one of the things that we're kind of incubating. Is this something people want? Or is this something people are interested in? Is these features? Same thing with a lot of the things with Fancy Zones. Are these things people are interested in? Let me give you another example, just us kind of trying stuff out. So the preview pane here, let me go kind of expand this out here. And the preview pane is one of those things where if you said, Clint, would you ever use this? Back in the day, I would probably say no, because it never did files that matter to me. Mm-hmm. And files that matter to me right now are Markdown and SVGs, and you can see the SVG rendered right up there. So when we started kind of like poking, like, why don't developers use the preview pane? It's because it doesn't render files that they care about. So one of the things that we're kind of thinking about and kicking the tires on, now that we incubated an idea, we got feedback on the idea and people liked it, was how can we make this more full? Because right now we only, PowerToys itself only added SVG and Markdown. But if you look at Visual Studio Code up here, they have a fancy thing called Monaco. And it's an open source project. And what Monaco is basically is the rendering tool. And one of the things that Windows Template Studio, which is a project I worked on before, we use Monaco as our diff engine and for displaying code. So it can display a lot of cool code real quick in every possible So this is one of the things that now we're thinking about is how do we leverage this kind of tech to render, files in here that matter to our power users. So a Python file, a C# file, a Rust file. These are all things that if I have quick readability, quick glanceability, it's going to make my life as a developer better.
Yeah, I can see the use of this
feature. Oh, yeah. We spend a lot of time that's kind of a common thing about power users, not just developers, but I think also general power users, is they've got a lot of stuff on their computer. They spend a lot of time browsing. They have to, it's something they wrote 3 years ago or created 3 years ago or downloaded 3 years ago. They've got to be able to very quickly zero in on that thing, and having some good preview is a big deal there. And you were talking about the fancy zones as kind of for big widescreen monitors, and I can certainly see that. But I turned off snapping in Windows because it never snaps the way I want it to. It's more of an irritant than it is than it is a help. And having the ability to kind of put it in different places and such, and more under control at my command, strikes me as just a much better way of doing it. So that's the sort of thing I'd love to see that migrate into Windows someday.
So, like I said, incubation and rapid iteration is kind of our mantra. And like, I kind of referenced its origin story being big screen monitor. And one of the things is everyone got super excited when they started seeing this, or like, especially for me personally, was the priority grid. I'm like, this is exactly what I need.
Yeah.
So the quirk was it was for a single monitor, large screen monitor. So then we actually had to backport in multi-monitor support.
Interesting.
So that's where it's like, okay, we found something that was really cool, and now we're iterating it to get there. It's for everyone. So one of the big ones we have between now and October is improving the editor. You flash up the editor, and an editor has to be launched in the monitor you want for that monitor to actually be adjusted. So it's one of the things now very similar to how Windows has its display, like on the monitor. We had a hackathon with the Microsoft Garage interns, and they produced a variant of Fancy Zones editor that can do this work. So it's just fantastic seeing what, you give a check to interns. You have 2 weeks to pull this off. It's actually to have maybe like 8 business days to pull it off, and this is just mind-blowing.
I'm always a little bit surprised that people, I think maybe some people inside Microsoft, some people even in the influencer community who don't tend to write a lot of real apps but focus more on video training and things like that, they don't understand how prevalent multi-monitor stuff is in business apps. The ability to tear off screens, for example, we build that into every modern app that we create, and it lights people up. And there are, of course, studies that one of the biggest bangs for the buck, one of the biggest payoffs that you can get is to spend a little bit on giving somebody an extra monitor, because that boosts their productivity so much that it's a trivial payback period for them. But software, of course, has to support it. And but I think I look, for example, at the UWP API, which was kind of created for that tablet mentality thing. And so we've had situations where people did not choose WP. They chose WPF instead, simply because of it's drop dead easy to do multi-monitor stuff in WPF.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
I wouldn't go quite drop dead easy with DPI stuff, but
I have a question. So I've done in the past, Windows calls for customized windows and things like that. Drawing your own window on the screen, and it was never easy. As I recall, it was lower level code calling into the unmanaged code at the time. I don't remember all the details. So I'm curious from a technology perspective. So here you are, you're putting these zones on the screen, and I'm able to drag my window around and drop it into one of those zones, and it sizes to that zone. So what technology are you using to write this application, this part of PowerToys, and how are you tapping into the layout engine on Windows? Are you writing your own?
So the PowerToys has a couple of flaws, and one of those core flaws is must use public. Go to the next philosophy, which is we want to be sure that we're showing developers only things that they could do, not special. So nothing PowerToys will ever be able to do is something that you as a developer could not do. There's been a bunch of hard decisions and hard conversations that have been made based on, it would be really great if we could do this, but then we look at it and we're like, well, it would give us an unfair advantage. Say like for certain things, for like packaging, we would have to be signed and be signed with a Windows cert versus a Microsoft cert. That means we can do things that normal apps can't. And that's unfair, in my opinion. Because we are open source, I don't think we actually mentioned that. So PowerToys is an open source project. And for me, that means everything we do, you as a developer should be able to do as well. If we're kind of like, yeah, you could do it, but you can't get it into the store, is that fair? No. So we're saying we must obey kind of this public API. And if us being signed as Windows means we can't be in the store, then so be it. We're not going to be in the store. We're going to fix the platform to make sure that as a end developer, you can do it. Same thing with private APIs. If there's a private API you need to get to work, we will make it into a public wrapper, make that public wrapper go through API board review process and make it so everyone can do it, not just PowerToys.
You're saying we'll benefit, the developers that use it right for Windows will benefit from that in the long term.
Yep, that's the entire point. That's the hope. And if it helps when we can literally point to things and say, here's a blocking issue. And we learn a lot by dogfooding our own tech and, beating the living bejeebers out of some of these APIs.
What is this written in? What language is this written in?
So parts of PowerToys are in C++. Parts of PowerToys are in .NET. And a lot of it is, where do we need just the pure raw performance of C++ versus the speed and benefit of .NET. And there will be points in time where you will see a PowerToy that was in .NET migrate into C++. And that's because we've tested it out and we said, yeah, this is something people want. We've tested it and said, we need better performance via telemetry. So once we start validating these ideas and going from, okay, this is a good idea, now let's make it battle hardened. Let's go make it perfect in performance. So like Fancy Zones, the editor is .NET. And I can see the editor in theory could probably always be .NET. But the engine that actually moves the windows around and all the snapping, that's all C++ because it has to act fast, have low level hooks. And when we start having to do the dragging and stuff, that's a lot of performance impact to a potential to the OS for some of the calls. So we want it to be blazing fast.
So you're not just using the UWP rendering stack with a grid and proportional columns as the rendering thing underneath the actual use of the product. That's actually C++ going at things a little deeper level, I take it.
Yeah. So there are parts of the app right now that are using WinUI. There are parts of the apps that are using WPF. There's parts of the apps that are using just raw C++.
Sounds like my app catalog.
But I think the fact that no one can tell is pretty powerful. I will say that there are things where I'm aware based on the bugs and just having been so close to the office for so long that I'm like, okay, that control, they're doing something. It's not quite right. You're not seeing this little here. And that tells me that kind of like tips the hand. But past that, I mean, you can make your apps look fluent. You can make your apps look pretty stunning. And it's just dependent on how much work you want to put into it. So like our entire settings UX now is right now is wrapped in a island. So it's a nav view under the hood now. And it just works. And that's the entire point.
Well, I'd really like to kind of make sure that gets clearly communicated. People who use some of these modern desktop technologies, there's an unfortunate tendency that they tend to lag a lot in using them to create new ways of thinking about UI. They tend to just kind of spoof Windows Form stuff and maybe give it a little better colors. So we're always short of examples of how to use modern display technologies, especially things that don't do particularly well in the browser. We don't have enough examples of how that stuff can really benefit the app. So being able to call out some of the stuff in PowerToys that is feasible for regular developers to do and inspire them, I think that'd be a good thing for you to do.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we're proactively looking at. One of the big things that we will be doing in the future will be adopting WinUI 3, and that will allow us to do WinUI desktop applications. So some of the things that we currently need to do is a bit interesting, but it gets us to where we need to be and gives the UI what we need to be. So then we can do that hot swap once the technology is a bit more ready for production applications. So WinUI 3, I think, is in a preview state right now. And there's a couple critical issues that need to get fixed before we can start adopting it. And once those issues get fixed, we're gonna go probably swap out some of our engines, dip our toe in, see if we start getting regressions and fixes, and then work directly with that team and make sure that those things are fixed for everyone.
Yeah, I'm impressed with what's been happening in WinUI.
Yeah,
I tried to catch it. Yeah, I tried to catch as many of the sessions as possible on the build conference last week. That's as a graphics person who's always in the past, I've tried to do apps that play around with the edges of Windows, try to push things. And in WPF days, we had issues with, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, Billy, in the WPF days when we did animation, right? That even though it was using DirectX, you would run into frame rate issues if you pushed it too hard. And you hit a wall.
Especially depending on the hardware, it's in the early versions of WPF, you could really get yourself in trouble, or running over Citrix or something like that. So there was a whole range of options with animation, and it wasn't always easy to find the balance point to use.
Yeah, and then with WinUI, I mean, that's just one small portion of what I'm impressed with. The whole build out of this new system is really cool. So for you, Clint, so you're going to be working with that team. So you're getting you get the same preview that all the rest of us do.
Yeah. So we've actually been partnering with that team since probably even before January of this year, and talking through all the different scenarios that our team would need to be able to adopt the feature. And here's how we're using it. Here's our use cases. And then doing so, having these conversations, we helped uncover a couple quirks and things that need to get fixed. And that's where I think it's fantastic that we're proactively always working with these teams and making sure that we're improving the tech for everyone, not just, Microsoft employees. We want to make sure that it's for developers, and make sure that's amazing for customers as well.
Well, I'm gonna put it to some tests, because having worked with both UWP and WPF quite a lot, while I like UWP for certain things, and boy, that match control is wonderful, and there are other really good things about it. WPF has some great things like routed events and such that the UWP API doesn't have. So I'm going to be trying. Okay, I've got various projects in these different technologies. I'm going to start putting them together and see how that works. I'm wondering, for example, if I have a WPF thing running against WinUI, is the routed event stuff going to work well, and can I still plug UWP stuff into that? It's going to be an interesting journry.
I think those are fantastic questions. I am sadly not the correct person to talk to on that.
I ask questions like that, and I haven't found anybody yet who can kind of.
I think that is a fantastic question to directly ask that team, and they're an open source project, so put it on there, and just hammer it and go, hey, what do we do? What's the migration path? And then another great thing could be is maybe let's go create a open source equivalent to it that works in UI.
Yeah. That'd be nice.
Just to throw that curveball out there.
Yeah, well, I have a list of people I'd like to have on the show, and several people on the WinUI team I'd like to interview or have here. Michael Hawker's coming on next week to talk about.
I love Michael. He's fantastic.
Yeah. He's going to come in and talk about.
He's on my Rolodex of I need help.
Yeah. So that's another example. He's building the community toolkit, and again, how does that integrate? I know he's working with the WinUI team, but so for me, what fascinates me is how people like you and your team decide the technology you're going to build, and then how you actually utilize it. And so it's great to hear.
It's a real challenge too, just to aim it at the right people. Because I remember when you and I talked about Windows Template Studio, and I talked about some of the ways we build application shells for XAML, and I don't know that we build them like other people build them. So it was a tough thing for you to you take some of Billy's wacky ideas. Well, they sound good, but would people out there doing regular apps actually use them?
Well, I think talking to different people, you get different viewpoints, and this goes back to like diversity and inclusion. Making sure that you talk to everyone, you don't exclude anyone. Different things impact people. Here's actually a story that this was an unintended benefit user that we didn't even think about for PowerToys. Is someone tweeted Jennifer Gentleman on Twitter saying like, hey, there's this keyboard remapper tool that was just announced. Like, can it help out my son? And turns out her son had a disability, and he's trying to type on the keyboard, and he kept on hitting F1. And for those who don't know, F1 typically brings up help, which is good in some scenarios, but if you keep on accidentally hitting that key, that really could potentially, it disrupts your workflow. It inhibits your ability to do things. So what do? And the answer typically is live with it. And that's not the correct answer. So this mother asked Jen, hey, could this disable that key? And as soon as I saw the tweet, I was like, yeah, you can orphan the key, or you can remap it to do something else. And that's one of the great things. Now we have a way to enable people to make their keyboard their keyboard. So now with one single utility that is in preview, early days on PowerToys and a lot of this stuff. That was the first public release of Keyboard Remapper. And we helped solve an accessibility problem. And that wasn't even our intended, use case. We built it so you could orphan keys, but it wasn't in the back of our heads. We never really thought about, hey, this could benefit that set of users. And that's when, like, by targeting the super high-end user group, we have to get flexible for everyone. And that's one of the real big powerful things, because we have to assume people are going to want to do crazy, wacky things with their keyboards. And in doing so, we built such a robust system that now it helps out someone to help out their son and their child. So as a dad, I'm like, this is fantastic.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. You're aiming at folks like me who think the caps lock key is useless and just don't want it to work at all.
Yeah.
But for free, you got all these extra possibilities. Yeah.
Like one of the things that I kept on challenging the group of devs building out Keyboard Manager was on keyboards, like, the Surface keyboard or my laptop is, I want F keys to always be F keys. Always be F keys. As for the audience that's watching, like for me, F5, F6, F7, F8, like those are mission critical keys for me.
But if you don't have keys like this, these kind of keys, you can see that the F keys up there have other default uses if you don't sort of press the right toggle on them.
Yeah, well, like think about it on a laptop, your function key gets toggled. For me, I always accidentally toggle my function key. And the problem with the function key is it's actually a hardware-based key. So we typically can't override that key. But what we can do is dual map a key. So you can say like, hey, hit F key, type F1 through F12. Now toggle it again, hit F1 through F12. So now we know like F1 on your keyboard is brightness. We know that in this other state, it's actually F1, because for me, the quirky thing is I've used, Surface laptops forever. To date, I don't know if the light is on. Does that mean it's going to act like an F key, or does that mean it's going to like turn up my monitor brightness? I don't know. It's one of those things where eventually I will figure it out, and then I go to a different laptop and it's going to be totally different.
How many, taking a tangent here, how many tools are in PowerToys?
So right now there is 7 tools, and some of them are multiple tools.
And
I'll say 7 core classifications of tools.
And you're working on more. And then I think I understood. I saw you say at Build that you've been crowdsourcing ideas.
So at our repository, people can request either enhancements or new PowerToys. So I think right now there's a good solid 500.
Wow.
Like enhancements or ideas. What we're trying to do is be hyper focused at this point for stability and for quality for version 1. So right now, we're probably going to say this is the cutoff. We're going to move forward with what's currently there, and all we're going to do is add polish, add correctness, add quality, localization, accessibility, and everything there. So that is kind of what we're hyper focusing on in those aspects. So like one of the things that actually right now we're seeing is a lot of people are asking for localization. And when we think about localization, 100% super important. And when I say super important, half the PowerToys team is in Europe. They all speak different languages. One of the primary dev lead is Italian. A couple people are based in Russia, and another group of individuals that are working on PowerToys are based in Canada. So some speak French, some speak other languages. So it's super important to make this localized. However, it's coming, like, we're adding in lots of stuff. We're changing the UX heavily. We're tweaking and adjusting and tweaking and adjusting. So for us to add in, actually do the translations now, what's going to happen is you're going to see this rolling effect of some things are correct and other things aren't because we're iterating so quickly. So now that we're backing off on the features and we're focusing on stability and making things, and like actually the refinement process, we can start making sure, like, okay, do we feel this one is ready to get localized? Yes, fantastic. We're going to send it off to the local team and get that added back in. So we're not quite there yet, but we are quickly approaching that state, and we hear the feedback. We know we need to be localized. And it's super hard to do this much rapid iteration and then get it added. And it's also super expensive because of that. So it's like, great, well, we just changed the string and now we need to get it relocalized versus let's pause for a little bit and then do it in one chunk. And even then we'll still need to tweak some things, but most of it will stabilize. Like literally in the .18 release, we rewrote our entire settings system. So all that stuff would have to get retranslated.
I have a question for you on one of the features I saw. I think it's called Run.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't used it yet. So when I first saw that, I thought, well, why would I need that? Because I would just use the Run command in Windows. What's different about Run in PowerToys?
So Run is kind of like, it's basically an app launcher. And actually, what we if you look at our code base, it's actually referred to as launcher. And then a couple months before we released it, we realized we can't call it launcher because there's Microsoft Launcher for Android. And a bunch of the team people use iPhones, so we didn't actually think about the Android product. And this is why naming stuff is hard. So when we talk to developers, we get a bunch of feedback. The entire thing is like, I want stuff to be blazing fast. I want just to be able to hit the key and it just type. And when we started talking to individuals, it's like, I want it to be, always correct, predictable. We can go down the list. So we started kind of brainstorming. It's like, is this something we kind of want to test out and iterate on and incubate? And the answer was yes. So as you saw, one of the design decisions we did was it is center based. It's not based where the start menu is. And that goes back to the large screen user. I also noticed that here
the size of the box is big and the size of the text around it is large, as opposed to a little tiny 10-point font.
So that's probably going to be something that we'll add in as a setting to be able to adjust that back in. There's a couple bugs that have been filed against us saying it's too big, and it's totally fair feedback. So it's one of those items where we're learning based on feedback what things need knobs. We're learning what things need adjustability. And some of these things were left out intentionally because you start getting death by 1,000 choices. So why design a system for a bunch of hypotheticals knowing that you may never encounter these hypotheticals? Now, there is a subclass of hypotheticals 100% we should, correct and work on. But some of them are very opinion-based, such as, is this too big? Should this be smaller? So as a team member, my opinion versus, Walt and Billy, if you were on the team, we're all equal. Like, okay, great. I feel it's a little bit too big. Okay, well, let's just put it out there and see what people say. let's go actually get user feedback on this stuff. And that's actually what we're doing. And it's super powerful, super helpful. And what's fantastic also being open source is the community helps find and correct some of these things for us. So one of the things, we actually have an open pull request that is for PowerToys Run will still activate on full screen applications. And someone did a pull request to help fix this for us.
That's nice.
Awesome. Another, and I can't thank that person enough, because by them helping fix this bug and adding in the feature, it helped us prioritize other work that we can then help fix, like our search results. Like I keep on iterating on we're early days, we're incubating and stuff. So some of the things need improvement, but at a point you get this idea of, do you wait until everything is perfect, or do you release it into the wild and see what needs improvement? So it's a delicate balance, and you have to make that decision. And we made the decision of, let's start getting real life feedback.
I think that's a completely appropriate approach. I will say though that for my own apps, I've thrown in the towel on trying to decide sizes. I just built scaling in to every app that I do because it's pretty easy in XAML to do it. Because I've never been able to find the balance that with all the different sizes and all the and young eyes and old eyes and everything. I just built scaling in automatically now.
Yeah. And like another interesting, like putting it out in the wild, you start seeing a classification of bugs and permutations that you never encountered before. And it's great to see the community jump in and like as a collective start, where are the dots? So like I'm a firm believer developers are a hybrid of like a lawyer and a detective half the time. So, and the lawyer in us is basically like, yeah, the API said this, but did it really mean this when it, and yeah. The, unless if it's my API, and then it's like, no, it really meant that. And then, detective is like, you start getting these reports and you're trying to piece together what's actually happening in the hood. So we hit a bug where, for noting, once again, we have a worldwide team working on this product. However, what is everyone has their window set to EN-US. So bug in our search tool, when we were returning a localized file path. And our entire dev team didn't realize it because everyone was running in the US. And what this was, if you were searching for a file that was in your users directory, it wouldn't work. And because users came back localized. Yeah. So if you were running a Spanish loc version of Windows, the file path on disk is C:/users, but what was getting returned to us was the Spanish version of users. Right. So when we try to query the file, it's like, I don't know what the heck, like I can't find this file on the disk. And we're like, and it took, once we started seeing, here are bug reports, and we started merging them all together, we started noticing a pattern. And that pattern was the word user was localized. And once we started doing that, an actual community member was like, hold my beer, and then submitted a pull request for us as literally our team was starting to gear up and was going to produce the pull request. And that to me is fantastic power of community. And like I said, like a collective cohort is we start noticing the trends. Like I'd say something and then someone else would say something and the third person would say something. And you start going, I think this is the issue. And then next thing, boom, there's a pull request, and it's fantastic. I love it.
That is to me one of the biggest nice things about open source stuff. It's the sharing of the stuff, and that's all fine. But the collaborative aspects really put it into a different era. Because I remember when I used to review packages for buyer's guides back in the late 90s, and at least 3 different packages I reviewed, I would go to a dialogue and the button to advance was not there. It just didn't show up. And on the first one, I figured out what it was. And then I told all the others, you've never tested your product on large fonts, have you, in Windows? Because they would say, yeah, we've had people say that, but we can't reproduce the issue. Well, yeah, you get a big enough group that's diverse enough, you're going to find those things a lot faster. Those developers inside that company, just all of them were young, they had great eyes, they weren't old like me, so they didn't use large fonts. So yeah, getting a group of diverse people together to find things like that is I think, a really positive movement and a good thing about open source.
Yeah, I think the other thing Clint said is that he's got the target audience for this is power users. So you got developers who want to help, and you got power users who are exercising the application and using it in diverse ways.
In combinatorics, the combinatorics get so big.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time, folks. So Clint, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge on the Windows or the Microsoft PowerToys. I'm getting the branding wrong.
Yeah, and if anyone actually wants to download PowerToys or help contribute, it's aka.ms/PowerToys, all one word. That's a direct link to our GitHub repository. Love to have people working, finding, there's 800 different ways you can help out, from helping, someone actually just find a ton of spelling mistakes in our code base, helping out a README, helping, figure out like the correlation of different bugs. Like you don't have to be a developer alone and fix and do coding. There's 800 different ways you can help collaborate as well.
That'll be awesome. Thank you for joining us. Next week, we are talking to Michael Hawker. He's on what's the Windows
Community
Toolkit, and he's going to be our guest for next week. I'm excited to talk to him too. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on the Desktop Developer Show.